This is a framework that you can use to manage employees. And for all of my employees who's watching this presentation, if you manage operations and you're sick and tired of wasting time and effort, then this presentation is for you. So there's this very famous video of Elon Musk. He's basically outside, where the rocket ships are, and he's basically kind of like demonstrating his 5-step process and explaining that to the camera. This is exactly what he says. Number 1, make your requirements less dumb. Number 2, delete. Number 3, simplify, optimize. Number 4, accelerate cycle time. Number 5, automate. And in today's video, I'm going to cover 3 things. So first of all, I'm going to tell you how Elon used this 5-step process to kind of take over Twitter. And through that process, you're going to find out a lot more about this 5-step process. Number 2, I'm going to explain about how I personally use Elon's 5-step process in my own company. Number 3, I'm going to tell you why you should do this for every single aspect of your own life. Okay, so who here recognizes this photograph of Elon walking in to Twitter's HQ with this sink in his hands? Okay, good. So a few people. I'm not sure if you guys remember this, but back then Twitter had 8,000 employees before Elon came into the picture. And after Elon came in, he basically slashed 6,500 jobs. 6,500, that is a lot of people. And yes, after that, people said that Twitter couldn't survive for such a small team. People thought that Elon was crazy. But this was actually step 1 in his 5-step process. Make your requirements less dumb. So before Elon came into the picture, there were many assumptions at Twitter. So first of all, being that you needed a big team of 8,000 people instead of a small team of 1,500 people. And obviously in our company, we have maybe around 15, 20 people or so. Number 2, you needed a heavy content moderation team. For anyone who's unfamiliar with how Twitter works right now, this is actually a very important factor in one of the major changes that Elon made. Number 3, you needed to have complex bureaucracy and many more requirements within the company. So when Elon came to the picture, he questioned the core requirements. He questioned, why does a social media platform need so many people? Why do we need to maintain so much dead code? Most importantly, he questioned whether Twitter would actually collapse without its many headcount and processes. And keep in mind, 6,500 people, the amount of salary that you have to pay for all of these people, it is not a small number. Now, moving on to second step of Elon's 5-step process, deletion. So this, I think, is one of Elon's favorite parts of his 5-step process. Elon is super aggressive about this. He deleted 6,500 jobs. He eliminated layers of management, content moderation roles, legacy projects, and a lot of things. Elon emailed and told teams at Twitter when he took over that they had to justify their existence. And if they failed to justify their existence to him, he basically shut down their department. As a result of this, a huge amount of dead code, legacy projects, and basically non-productive teams were deleted from Twitter. But aggressive deletion is a big part of Elon's style. There's this podcast that came out, I think, this year between an ex-employee at XAI. He's now a former employee. Back then, he actually did this podcast without seeking permission from Elon. And he actually revealed a lot of information about his time working at XAI. And one of the key things that stood out to me was that he said that it's very common within XAI or within any of Elon's companies to basically delete stuff first. And then when you find out that something along the business line is affected, then later you have to add the code back in. And given that we're a development company, I think a lot of developers here can kind of understand that, where you need to go to GitHub and kind of git restore something that's been deleted. But apparently this deletion style and practice is incredibly common at Elon's companies, and he always prefers to delete and simplify things. And if you need to add it back later, he'll then kind of get down to that process. Now moving on, simplify or optimize. So I just want to point out one thing very quickly. At the earlier video that I showed where Elon was kind of out by the rockets and talking about his 5-step process, he mentioned that a lot of people like to jump to step number 3, simplify and optimize, which is where we are right now. But a lot of people tend to skip the first 2 processes. So if you're watching this presentation, please make sure to remember to number 1, question all requirements, and number 2, delete stupid requirements before jumping to step number 3 right now, which is optimizing and simplifying things. So do not be too eager to jump to this optimization stage. After Elon took over, first of all, content rules were simplified to freedom of speech, not reach. What this means effectively is that Elon basically said, we are not going to stop anyone from saying anything they don't want, but rather we're going to change the algorithm in a way that we only show things that kind of fit within our content moderation policy. Now, this sounds like a very small topic now in hindsight, but back then, this was a very major issue. Speaking about the algorithm, Elon also open sourced his algorithm. And I think most people here know what open source is, but basically you can kind of think about like WordPress versus Shopify, where like one thing, the code is made public and everyone can see it, whereas with the other one, like you don't actually get to see the code and it's kind of like privatized, etc. Number 3, Elon also like made a drastic action of moving data centers. So there's this very famous story where they had this data center at Sacramento that was costing them hundreds of millions or more than $100 million a year, if I'm not mistaken. And basically in 2022 Christmas, Elon was with his cousins and security, and they were actually flying back home for the holidays to Texas. And en route, he decided to redirect the plane to actually Sacramento, where he, his cousins, and security took apart about 700 servers by hand, loaded them into a rented U-Haul-like truck, and drove all the way from Sacramento to Portland, Oregon. But a lot of people who were there kind of recounted that this was an incredibly scary process for them because most people don't have the same type of aggression or urgency that Elon has. And keep in mind that all of these like hundreds of servers were very expensive equipment. They would have affected Twitter's operations, which is $1 billion company. And Elon just decided to kind of do this massive undertaking, almost like impulsively. The old management team at Twitter and board, they were okay with this at high expense, but Elon wasn't. And whether you agree with this aggressive style of moving everything at the last minute with such urgency, according to X/Twitter, they basically end up saving $100 million from this server move from Sacramento to a cheaper existing facility. Okay, now I'm going to move on to step number 4 of Elon's 5-step process, which is accelerate cycle time. In other words, speed is king, do it today, not tomorrow, which as everyone knows here is one of the most common sayings that I'll use in any sort of like text or verbal communication with anyone here. With a smaller, leaner team at Twitter, Elon pushed for rapid changes, like for example, I mentioned making the algorithm open source, but he also like changed the algorithm in a fairly short period of time. Rolling out new features like the edit button and making the amount of characters that you could add in a tweet much longer. And this took Twitter a long time to do, but when Elon came to picture, he added this in. Obviously, everyone knows about the blue checkmark situation that happened. And while he caused a lot of issues, like with healthcare companies by doing that and maybe lost some advertisers, he at least like actually got stuff done, even though it was in a short period of time. And there was some things that he didn't foresee coming. Number 3, launching Grok, which is kind of like a ChatGPT competitor, and I personally prefer using Grok right now, at least over ChatGPT. So he also kind of made some big moves in terms of AI. The most common consensus is that after Elon took over, he basically took Twitter from a very slow conglomerate to a very fast-moving tech startup-like company, right? Which brings us to the very last step of his 5-step process. Number 5, automate. Automation came later and more selectively. I'll just give one example of how Elon maybe executed this for himself. Elon Musk launched something called Community Notes, which basically leveraged Twitter's existing user base instead of hiring expensive, big teams at Twitter to do the heavy content moderation that was here previously before he took over. So Elon basically exploited the competitive advantage that Twitter's brand had, and he basically took the people who were complaining about how there were very heavy content moderations, and he passed a problem to them saying okay, why don't you guys, since you guys are complaining so much about the heavy content moderation, why don't you instead go and solve the problem, and we'll open source the content moderation. Which, if you think about it, is actually a very, very brilliant move on Elon's part, because if someone keeps complaining about how bad of a job you're doing, you're passing the job to them, at the same time slashing all of the costs that you have within your company that's out of your own pocket, and you're also saying hey, so if you're not happy with the moderation right now, it's now up to you. You're now to blame because you guys are the users and you guys are moderating your own platform, so it's nothing to do with me. Okay, so that was a long process. Everyone still with me so far? Now let's move on to part number 2, which is how I use Elon's 5-step process in my own company. As everyone knows, we do a lot of things differently in our company, but I'm just going to give a few quick examples. So first of all, make your requirements less dumb. So everyone told me when I first started that remote employees don't work, and obviously that is not true. Also, everyone told me that I shouldn't be starting a company when I was 18. And everyone said that you have to screen record employees. Next part is deletion, which is basically I deleted the requirement that you need to hire only in-person employees. I also deleted the requirement that if you do hire anyone, you need to screen record and micromanage them. And as everyone here knows, like no one is doing any sort of micromanaging on you. Okay, number 3, optimize. So this is personally my favorite part. So optimize meaning, like for example, number 1, we use Loom to send EOD updates. So instead of having like countless Zoom meetings or in-person meetings every single day, to your manager, you just need to send a Loom recording of everything that you did that day, and your manager will basically watch at the end of the day at maybe 1.5x speed and leave comments at the timestamps on Loom recording itself. Everyone communicates on WhatsApp instead of using another channel like Slack or something like that, so that everything is basically the same platform of communication that we use with our clients, so that instead of like switching between so many platforms or applications, we're just using one thing. And of course, like within our company, when anyone onboards, we have a Google document of all of the Loom training videos. So we have training videos for pretty much everything and written SOPs that really help to optimize every single thing that we do in the company. Number 4, accelerate cycle time. So all of our sales consultants will narrow down the design with clients before they sign up, which obviously means that when clients sign up with us, there's a lot like less back and forth, between a project manager, and especially when a sales consultant brings on a new client and all of the design preferences needs to be transferred over to the project manager's brain. We basically save a lot of time by doing the design before collecting any sort of payment. Reply time is basically under 5 minutes on text and within 1 hour on Zoom, which is basically kind of like speed is king, the saying that I mentioned just now. And we also give unlimited revisions in 3 or 8 weeks for all of our website development clients. I'm not sure if a lot of you guys here know this, but the reason that we have this done is because if we don't have this policy, then clients will actually drag on the project for as long as 12 months, I think is our longest. But instead, if we give unlimited revisions in 3 or 8 weeks, then it forces clients to do as many back and forths as possible with us, which we're okay with, because at least in terms of a time perspective, we can say that each project will be completed within 1 month or 2 months. Next, number 5, automate. So obviously I talked about pre-recording training videos, having pre-built designs as a boilerplate which can be cloned. So our developers kind of have this, so maybe not a lot of you guys here are aware of this. And number 3, we have pre-written acknowledgement forms, like the onboarding forms that every client has to sign before they sign up, so that we ensure that expectations is set in the correct way. Okay, so we're almost done with this presentation. Moving on to step number 3, how I've also used everything that I've shared with you today in my day-to-day life. Of course, this presentation is for work, but don't hesitate to use this in your personal lives, because if your personal life is more optimized, then obviously you'll have more focus that you can then transfer over to work. So to demonstrate, here are some examples of how I've used this myself, which is number 1, I have kind of 2 Apple keyboards that I use, which is better for posture. And I think everyone here knows that if you're an Apple user, it's very difficult to get a good split keyboard. So a lot of people, they will kind of say, oh, you need to get a split keyboard because it's a common convention. But instead, I basically question the original requirements, and I got 2 keyboards of my own. I also don't season any of my food or my chicken, so instead I just kind of get sauce, like maybe curry or soup, and I just kind of add it in so that it saves time on the cooking process. And last but not least, I also own 3 different main shirts, which is basically same color, but just depending on the different weather, either t-shirt or jumper, etc. So it saves a lot of time, and this is also just kind of optimizing my entire life. And so that is why I do and don't do so much weird stuff, but this habit seems to work in business. And so if you're watching this video right now, please copy this 5-step process from Elon and use it in your own life. Subscribe if you find that this is useful information. And if anyone who's listening to this is lazy, please feel free to share this video or presentation with any of your employees. Thank you.